Hey everyone, I'm having maybe a medical emergency and thought I'd use this forum as a way to ask about it. It's a long and strange story, so I'll jump right in. I've had sleep paralysis since I was 12. My mom believes it started as a puberty thing, but it's been 8 years, and at least 3 times a week I get locked in my own body, unable to move or talk, only able to breathe and occasionally open my eyes. At first, that was the most of it, just waking up in the night, stuck staring at the ceiling or at a wall, scared but very relieved when it was over. After a year or so, I then began getting the waking nightmares other people get. To start with, it was just noises, indiscernible voices, loud bangs from inside my skull, and the occasional shout from a person not there. Couple months after it began, I would start trying to pry my eyes open. It was hard, but whenever I could manage to open them, I saw bizarre hallucinations. They were always black smears or blobs drifting in and out of view. Sometimes they would stop and just remain still. Whenever that happened, I clenched my eyes shut. There's something haunting about a shapeless entity observing you as you watch it. I know it wasn't real, but the fact it can move and chooses not to scared the hell out of me, even if it was just a blurry circle. I've done my fair share of research on sleep paralysis, and my case is a severe one, but still common enough version of it. The more I looked into it, the more fear I got waiting for the future. A big one I was scared of was hearing footsteps walk right up to you. The idea of that happening to me drove me insane for a while. And then one night when I was 14, it happened. I awake from a nightmare, some bizarre dream about a murderous clown, I think. I was locked in my body as per usual. Then I heard a strange series of noises. First a creaking door, followed by a slam, whisperings that I couldn't comprehend, and then clomp, clomp, clomp. 3 heavy footfalls right beside my bed. The whisperings are partially discernible but still nonsense. Maybe we should see the monkeys, go to the ground floor. It was driving me mad, line after line just like that, but instead of all around me, right in front of my face, inches away from me. It had to be real. It had to be some drunken meth head freak looming over me trying to get my attention. He broke the vase. I tried to keep it upright. I fought my eyelids. I forced them open as the bright light of the day made its way through the window into my sensitive eyes, and as they finally cracked open fully, nothing. Dead silence, and a vague blur hovering just in view. Relief filled my body, but so did dread. Once one new symptom starts, it tends to become commonplace. So from that moment on, every other night I had to deal with something walking up to me and whispering insanity into my ears. Another symptom I dreaded every time I read about it was the hatman. Apparently nearly every single person who regularly gets sleep paralysis would see a shadowy figure wearing a hat. No one can definitively say what kind of hat he wears, but they usually lurk just within view. Every time I read that when I was young, I would feel sick. I can handle the blurry shapes, even when they stop to look at me, but a full man just waiting for the time to pass in the corner of my eye was sickening. But the truth was, when I finally got that symptom, it was hilarious. The first time it happened, I was 18. I was having another episode where there was something walking up to me. Once again, I pried my eyes open. Only this time the voices continued, but they moved rapidly over to where a huge congregation of blobs had formed in the vague shape of a man, in the corner of my eye. At first I wanted to scream. A man was in my room and was whispering nonsense. "Bring out your rake, he's nearly ready." Then I had this overwhelming urge to check his hat. Everyone talks about his hat, so I wanted to finally get to the bottom of what it was. Lo and behold, a fedora it had to be. The short brim, divot on top, mixed with the vague outline of a trench coat. It was a blurry man trying to look like a detective, or maybe a Redditor. The idea made me snap out of sleep paralysis immediately and laugh my guts up until I cried. This guy? I thought. This guy is the thing everyone is scared of, a rambling idiot in a crummy cosplay. There is only one thing scary about him. Is he real? I know that's a bizarre question, but everyone seems to see him and he is always wearing a hat, so is he real? Or is he a visual ingrained in our minds, an evolutionary fear? If that's the case, why do our minds give him a hat? It's always bothered me a bit. The final symptom I got later was the weight on my chest. Apparently, a lot of people get a heavy, hallucinatory feeling on their chest when they're in sleep paralysis. They get a sensation of a little creature resting on them and holding them down. Often this is accompanied by a shortness of breath or the inability to breathe. I never got it until a year ago. At 19, my mom wanted me to move out. She was a very traditional parent. Once you're 18, out of the house, live on your own. I managed to hold on to an extra year, but then my mom buckled down, made us look for some housing. You're gonna be 50 and still living with us, Bailey. Harden up and move out, she would tell me. I always found it insane. She acted like living with a 19-year-old was like looking after a middle-aged man. Besides, she never taught me how to look for a house, get a loan, find places to rent. Nothing. I was on my own working it all out, and she would occasionally shoot me with an address or an affordable place to rent or buy. I would attempt to look into it, but I always got confused or embarrassed while inquiring, so I didn't get far on my own. Mom then received an offer. Mom is a manager at a local grocery store, a small chain but nothing major. The owner of the whole chain comes in from time to check in with each individual store. Her name is Pauline. She's around 70 and she was so incredibly kind. All the time. She always listened to my mom's long-winded, goes-nowhere stories, and even gave her paid leave once when Mom fell ill. Anyway, Pauline came into the store and my mom went on her usual rambles, but this time she brings up me needing a home. Pauline apparently lit up like crazy and was almost begging my mom to move me into the house neighboring hers. See, Pauline owned nearly her whole street. She bought it out years ago. She rented the houses out for cheap to families in need of easy accommodation, and claimed to have even sold a few off well below market value. The house next to Pauline's has been vacant for a while, she told my mom. About 4 years or so is what she said, so she'd happily let me rent it for an insanely cheap amount, just so she was making some kind of money from it. So that's where I moved in. The first day I moved in, I got to meet Pauline myself. She was short but held herself well, white curly hair and even a small grandma mustache on her upper lip. She helped me tidy the place of dust, which shockingly wasn't much, so I asked her, "I thought this place had been empty for a while?" Pauline nodded. "Yes, a couple months now. Didn't have the time to dust every day, so it built up a little. Sorry." I got quite confused. That wasn't what Mom said. I was sure of it. After a small period of awkward silence as we scrubbed old grit from the oven, I stopped and looked at her. "A couple months?" She nodded again. Her face seemed cold. Mom said it was 4 years. Pauline stopped for a moment like she was caught off guard and then chuckled. "Oh, my bad, sweetheart. That must have made me sound like quite the liar." She slapped her hand on my shoulder and chuckled a little more. "Your mom must have misunderstood. What I meant was, I can't keep someone in this house for a long period of time. They usually move out after 6 months or so. Some don't even last a full month." She was still chuckling to herself, which made me feel uneasy. It wasn't really a funny misunderstanding, just a simple mistake, but she laughed so awkwardly, like she was laughing out of courtesy at a bad joke. I turned back to the oven and started scraping away. I wondered why people couldn't stay long. The house was nice, well kept, fairly large, and even still had a decent amount of furniture. I dragged my head from the oven and got her attention by tugging on her dress like a 5-year-old. "Why don't people stay?" I asked as I stood to my feet and dusted my knees off. Pauline let out a little sigh and then tossed her rag into the sink. "I should have told you from the beginning." She walked out and waved a hand for me to follow. She took me to the bathroom and then pulled the door of the shower open and pointed to the drain. "There's something wrong with the plumbing. I've had people come to look at it, but it can never seem to be fixed. A rancid smell occasionally lifts up through this pipe, and a few folks have claimed they saw fatty hunks rise from it. Their best guess was the sewers are backing up into the house's plumbing. I don't know how it works, so I just took their word for it." She looked to me with a worried smile. "Sorry I didn't tell you. That's not fair on you." I told her it was all right, and then I stuck my head in to look closer at the drain, and then I could smell it. It smelt bad, like someone had left chicken out for too long and it had gone sour. But admittedly, it wasn't too awful. "They moved out over that smell?" I asked with a soft chuckle. "Not even that bad. You have nothing to apologize for, Pauline." After that, I was all moved in, and after the first week at the new house was when I got the symptom. I had a nightmare about a car accident, and in the dream the steering wheel pushed into my chest, crushing my lungs. When I awoke, I still felt that crushing feeling, and once again I was locked into my own body. What was strange about the sensation was that it didn't match any description of what I read online. Online people say that the sensation is like a singular, unmoving weight on your chest, like it sits mid-chest or closer to the stomach, and it remains until you finally snap out of it, but in my case, it started at my belly and shifted up my body. Also, it wasn't in one spot. It almost felt like something was wrapped around my torso, like rope loosely tied around my body. Strangely, the sound of footsteps and whisperings were gone, and instead replaced by a steady rhythmic breathing. I needed to prove nothing actually bad was happening to me, so I fought to open my eyes, but my body just didn't let me. I strained and tensed, but nothing worked. Frustrated, I stopped and let whatever the symptom was pass. When it did, I felt sick. The symptom didn't just stop abruptly or fade slowly. It stopped naturally. The weight around my torso lifted, like something was grabbing my whole body and decided to let go. The breathing sounded like it turned away from me, and then I heard the hallucination leave. Heavy footfalls across the carpeted floor, and then wet slapping as it hit wood and tile. I heard it walk through my house. Its breaths were still loud enough to make out from a fair distance, and then it disappeared. It sounded muffled suddenly before I couldn't hear anything at all. A soft rattle filled the empty air briefly, before still silence came to me again. Then I woke up. I sat upright for a moment to gain composure, and then hung my head in my hands. It was awful. It was by far the worst hallucination I've ever had, and if it became constant, I feared I'd need psychiatric help or pills. After 10 minutes or so, I laid back down and fell to sleep again. The following morning, I looked around my house, almost paranoid, as if someone actually got into my room and held me down. I felt stupid when I checked underneath my bed like a child looking for the boogeyman, but I needed to be sure. I went to the bathroom and the smell had gotten slightly stronger, but not by much. It was still easily tolerable. I did see the fatty substance though. It had collected around the rim of the shower grate, but not through the slats that hair usually gets caught in. It almost looked as if the fat was placed along the rim and someone closed the grate over the top of the gooey substance. Strangely, the smell wasn't coming from the pasty pink fat. It was coming from something in the pipes. Out of courtesy, I informed Pauline the fat showed up in the drain. She thanked me and said she could get a plumber if I really needed one, but reminded me that they never seemed to find anything, so I passed on the offer. The hallucinations went back to normal for maybe a week and a half. Then the awful one came back. This time, when I awoke from some kind of dream, I was on my side, facing the wall. Immediately, I knew I was paralyzed, so I tried to pry my eyes open. As I tried and struggled, I felt something nudge my back, a small push. It didn't feel like a hand. It felt more like a dog pushing its forehead into you to get pats. I was shocked, but just kept telling myself it was a hallucination, which calmed me down. Push. It shoved me harder. I felt my body rock slightly. Was I twitching to match the sensation of the hallucination? Is that possible? Move, a gurgled voice said behind me, right behind where I was pushed. Move. It sounded like someone was talking in a cavern, but the exit to the cave was directly at my lower back. I was horrified. Normally, the voices are whispers, not a speaking voice, and not that close. I needed to open my eyes. I had no other choice. I pulled and pried, and finally they snapped open. I stared at the blank white wall, lit in a faint red of my alarm clock's light. I then saw, like clockwork, the Hatman just in the corner of my vision. I felt so relieved. The voice must have come from him, right? Have you died? The voice echoed again. It paused between each syllable. My stomach sank. The voice had come from behind me. The damn Hatman was in front of me. I then felt one final mighty shove which rolled me face down. I stared into my pillow. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't lift my head. I then heard the soft footfalls of the thing behind me leave, followed by the exact same noises as last time. Wet slapping, then a vibration that filled the house. I didn't even care. I was face down in my pillow and I couldn't even get a breath in or out. I tried so hard. I tried to suck air in, but only got nosefuls of fabric. Try going to the yard. It keeps the flies off your back. The regular hallucinations kicked back in. It startled me, but I needed to force myself to wake up fully. I strained my neck. I pulled up as hard as humanly possible. My head was getting light. I could see stars in my vision. No, it's serious. I have it. I was dying, and the last thing going through my head was the ramblings of an insane hallucination. In one final attempt, I wreathed my head off my pillow, and the ramblings stopped. The Hatman gone. I coughed and then cried. Why did my own body try to kill me? I went to the bathroom. More fat rimmed the drain. The smell still the same. I looked closely at the pinkish flesh. It was wet. It had just come up. Disgusting. I went to Pauline's house the following morning. The drain had bothered me, and the hallucinations made me want to double check if there were any way to set up security cameras, just in case. Pauline invited me in and we discussed the plumber. She said one would be in within the month. I then brought up the hallucinations. I explained what sleep paralysis was and why these hallucinations had me more freaked out. Pauline then went pale. She stood from the dining table we sat at and got herself a glass of water. Pauline, are you all right? I went to follow her. She slammed her glass on the counter and her look of fear turned to anger. How hard is it for you to make yourself move when this paralysis stuff happens? I was taken back by the question. I was asking for security cameras and she seemed upset that I get sleep paralysis. I responded, very difficult. I nearly suffocated last night. She got closer to me. Next time something is grabbing you, Bailey, maybe have a sense of agency and move yourself away. I didn't understand. Was she mad at me for not keeping myself safe? Was she confused? I couldn't think of a response. Pauline mumbled a string of vulgar nonsense and then looked at me. Bailey, please understand. I get that what's happening to you is all in your head, but when it happens, really try and push yourself. If there's something in your room, you need to get yourself out, right? I nodded. Right, obviously. After a few more tense moments, I excused myself and left. As I opened the front door, Pauline caught up to me. "Your mother says it's your birthday tomorrow? I'll look into getting some cameras as a late gift." I nodded. "Sounds good, thank you." I gave her an awkward hug and parted ways. The whole encounter bothered me. Why did she say something instead of someone when referring to the hallucinations in my room? Why was she mad at the fact I have a condition I couldn't control? I decided to distance myself from her. My only guess at the time was that she just didn't believe sleep paralysis was real, and I was some stupid teenager hiding from an intruder instead of getting help. The most recent hallucination is why I made this post. From what I can tell, visually, sleep paralysis hallucinations are just blobs or vague, shadowy shapes. They normally don't have color or vivid details, right? It was a night ago, a week after the pillow incident. I didn't even awake from a dream like normal, but I was on my back. I felt relaxed, loose. I nearly felt like I could move, but I didn't. I was too scared. The sound of heavy breathing was directly above me. It sounded like wind blowing through a cave tunnel. I felt it in my face. I felt the warmth of something or someone breathing onto my face. "Bailey, she calls you Bailey." The echoed voice gurgled forth from the abyss. Never in 8 years had a hallucination used my name. Never. I was horrified. I was on the verge of tears. "Bailey, have you died?" the voice asked like it had the other night. Pauline had been right. If this person was real, I needed to move. I needed to run. I went to struggle to open my eyes, but instead they flung open with ease. Lit only by the faint red from the clock was a being so horrific I don't know how my mind could have conjured it up. Looming over me was a man, maybe 7 feet tall. He wore no clothes and stood naked in my room. Where the genitals would be was just mushy flesh. Scanning up and down the torso, it didn't have a chest, just a flat slab of skin, no details. Its legs were thick like an elephant's, but its feet were long and stretched under my bed and out of sight. Its arms were the normal length a human of his size would be, but its hands, resting on my bed, were the length of his forearm. Each finger the length of my forearm. I then noticed one of its hands was already wrapped around my leg as if it was ready to yank me off. Its face, though, its face is where it becomes sickeningly vile. His mouth and nose jutted out like a horse, the nose resting on the upper lip tilted towards the roof even as it looked down at me. The eyes were bulbous and on the side of its head. They scanned the room like a chameleon, rotating independently. His teeth were a disorganized mess, no symmetry, no rhyme or reason to their placement, just a mess of busted browning teeth. Its mouth was agape. It felt like it was ready to bite into me, but instead a voice exited its throat. Without moving its mouth, it spoke from within its neck. "Your eyes are open?" It shifted its head so only one eye could gaze at me and investigate me closer. "Are you awake, Bailey?" The echo made sense. The voice was escaping from its barrel-like body and leaving through its elongated maw. "I can only feast on those who are awake." I so desperately wanted to sprint. I wanted to shove it down and run for my life, but I didn't. I couldn't. I was paralyzed, right? Honestly, I was too scared to check. "Last chance, Bailey," it gargled out. As it spoke, its teeth started to move, rotate around its gums like a chainsaw. The top and bottom rows rotated in opposite directions, and as they slowly spun around this thing's jaw, blood and drool formed and dripped from its gums to its lip. The sound of the teeth shifting through its gums was like cutting through raw beef with a dull bread knife. A soft sloshing could be heard as the mixture of drool and blood flooded down its neck. The grip on my leg grew tighter as the thing got closer to my face. A wad of drool slowly dripped out onto my pillow. It was maybe 2 inches away from my face when it screamed, "Wake up, Bailey!" The voice sounded like an explosion echoing out of a coal mine. Drool flicked over my face, some into my open eyes. It stung. It shouldn't have. It was a hallucination. It wasn't real. It couldn't be. I stood my ground. I didn't move. I didn't whimper. I even tried to blink as rarely as I could. It then let go of my leg. Its teeth slowed to a halt and it turned away, the breathing moving away with it. Then the wet slapping and the vibrations filled the house. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to try moving. I couldn't prove to myself that what just happened was real. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. I repeated that to myself until finally, after maybe 2 hours, I fell back to sleep. The following morning, this morning, I woke up. I had drooled in my sleep and it was all over my pillow. The strange fatty substance rimmed my drain again, so I decided to head to Pauline's to get an ETA on this plumber. I knocked on her door but got no answer. Strange, I thought. She was usually cooking breakfast before I even woke up in the morning. I could smell it through my window. I decided to have a quick walk around to the back door, in case she had fallen or had an accident. As I crossed past a window, I saw red. So much red. It was the bathroom. I peered in. Where her shower drain was, stood a pile of gore. An arm stuck out and around it a thick hunk of skin. It bloomed out like a rose from the drain. I saw a trail of blood led out of the bathroom and down the hall. Holding back vomit and forcing myself not to scream, I ran around the back of the house where she had a sliding glass door to get in. I prayed it was unlocked and yanked. It slid open. Bolting inside, I followed the red trail of crimson blood. It led to a room at the other end of the house, her bedroom. Laying on her pillow was just her head. Where her neck would have started was instead torn flesh. It looked as if it was shredded or ripped by small dull blades. I started screaming and took off out of the room, immediately phoning the police. When they arrived, they were shocked and confused. I told them my sleep paralysis and the fatty substance in the drain. They didn't believe my sleep paralysis story but seemed very interested in the substance. About an hour ago, I received a call from an officer I spoke to earlier that day. "Hey mate, how are you holding up?" he asked. His tone was soft but concerned. "I think as best as I could be given the situation," I responded. "Now Bailey, I think it's best for you if you find somewhere else to stay tonight. I think Pauline got herself mixed up in something nasty." The officer cleared his throat and I heard the rustling of papers. "We've never heard of a criminal organization that specializes in just indiscriminate murder, but we believe that's what happened here. Pauline kept a journal of people who lived on this street. We double-checked each name and they correspond with names of people who have gone missing within the past 4 years. Your name is at the bottom of that list." My heart sank. Pauline was trying to kill me? How? Why? The officer continued. "We believe this killer couldn't get into your house and so as punishment killed Pauline. We believe a chainsaw was used on her neck, and they used some form of long wire to try and pull her corpse into the sewer via the drain. How they expected that to work is beyond me. But when we examined the local waterways, storm drains and sewers, we found mounds of rotten flesh, bodies, the newest being around 2 months old." He continued explaining the details and how insanely long a wire or rope needs to be to pull a body from a house's drain system into the sewer, but they had done it numerous times. Most of the bodies were missing limbs or hunks of torso, and the cops think that Pauline was sent to clean up what they left behind. I had one last question for the officer. The dead bodies explained the smell, but what was the fat around the drain hole? We couldn't get a DNA match, but it's some kind of natural lubricant. We think the killers used it to yank as much of a person as they could into the drainage system. Now I'm sitting here lost in thought. The serial killer story makes some sense to me, but that monster felt so real. My mind could have just made it up to explain Pauline's weird behavior. So, does sleep paralysis normally get worse?